far towards the customer and there's a lot of costs involved. We get a lot of pressure from upstairs to, are we really driving revenue? Or there's just, hey, there's some big numbers on your P&L, let's come and give you some attention for some cost savings somewhere, or some revenue increases from people who are paid more than us but don't really have a clue about what's going on and how it all works and how we actually pay their salaries. I dare you to say that to your CFO in a hurry. But it also goes the other way, where the screws get tightened and then we get pressure from the CFO about why we aren't driving the kind of results they were hoping that we were going to drive. I'm not sure how that happens, but apparently you can't cut your way to profitability, as it turns out. I guess they don't teach you that in business school anymore. We have very different programs. Air Canada, obviously the new Aeroplan launch a couple of years ago. Marriott Bonvoy, obviously, let's go back 5 years. We had the merger with SPG. Bonvoy itself has undergone, a lot of, iterative changes. Tommy from Frontier, who was meant to be here, obviously a completely different type of program as well. My background is airline and hotel. For those that don't know, my biggest client has been Radisson Americas. A very different program, again, completely different sphere and customer base to Kathryn's. We've got a lot of interesting viewpoints, both here on the stage and what we've talked about in the last few years. Maybe when we first each speak, just do a quick introduction for those that might not know you or your role. But Scott, the title is, it's a leading title of the session. When you guys designed the new Aeroplan program, we've had a lot of detailed discussions about this, but you placed a lot of emphasis on wanting to make sure that you took members and customers who might not yet be members along for the journey. You wanted to make sure that Aeroplan was relevant to them. You wanted to make sure that they saw value in enrolling, engaging, staying engaged with the program. Obviously as an acquisition channel for Air Canada, the brand, but you wanted to be part of their lives. You wanted them to feel good about being in the program. Obviously then engaging in commercial favorable activities such as taking up a co-brand and things like that. But again, you wanted them to see value in it and not necessarily be seen to be taken advantage. And you guys put a lot of effort into designing that program. Almost 3 years down the track. Tell us how it's going.
So it's going really well. Short answer, really good. But to kind of back up, for those of you that are less familiar with the Aeroplan story, we had a really unique opportunity on our hands. We had, I've never seen this in my career, a team that was handed basically a checkbook to go and build a de novo loyalty program from the ground up. Completely new tech stack, completely new value proposition. And we actually had the benefit of about 1.5 years of time and space to do a lot of consumer research to really inform the design, to really make sure that we were putting our consumers right in the center of the design. And I say consumers instead of customers. I kind of trip on myself there a little bit because as we looked at what our design target was, it really was the Canadian consumer as a starting point. And then secondarily, there was the US market, which was very nascent for us from a membership base, and the question of how do we become a challenger loyalty brand in our second home market. Okay, so in Canada, we today enjoy the benefit of having about 1 out of every 5 Canadians as an active Aeroplan member. Active, meaning they've done something with us in the last 18 months. And that is absolutely a product of call it the member-centric design. Whether you are a 10+ time a year traveler, we hope that we defended and deepened your loyalty with us in the redesign. If you're an occasional traveler, somebody that travels once a year, once every other year, we hope that we earned your business as well because we lowered the hurdles of engagement in the program. We found other ways for you to earn points or enjoy the benefits of Aeroplan, including with our credit card, which it's a credit card, or it's a paid membership program that's cleverly disguised as a credit card when you think about it, because with that comes a lot of benefits for the average everyday consumer. And so we're very pleased to see the level of engagement that we're getting from both occasional and very frequent travelers, and that was really what we set out to design with the new program.
Kathryn, obviously quick introduction to yourself as well, but quick take on sort of following on from Scott there, where you sort of see Bonvoy right now, in the topic, in the context of the introduction of the topic.
For sure. So good afternoon, morning, good morning. I'm Kathryn Kilburg. I'm the Senior Director of Redemption Products and Dynamic Pricing with Marriott International, which means I get to do all the fun stuff related to loyalty. Everyone else deals with the marketing. I deal with making sure our members continue to find value, and that I'm continually balancing all the stakeholders that David spoke about. So as far as our company and kind of where, or our program and where we are, we're a more mature program at this point, but are still in a lot of the same places that Aeroplan is, but also trying to target our customers probably in similar ways as well. I really love how you had highlighted how there are a variety of ways that members engage with your program, and I think that is a key focus for us right now. Is we're not we don't want to be a traditional hotel loyalty program where all you do is earn from hotel stays or even just from co-brand spend, right? There are so many different ways that we can meet our members where they are, where they want to be, that we keep trying to both bring them in, but also continuing to price accordingly so they can find value.
Mm-hmm. Scott, let's be honest, I can say this, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but the truth is, when you went into the redesign of the Aeroplan program, and as you said, a secondary objective was to grow in the US market, which is not your primary market. It's a highly competitive market. But, at the same time, when you were redesigning Aeroplan, and again, I'll get away with saying it, so I'm not attributing this to you, but it was in the back of your mind, no doubt, that, US airlines the big three, had gained a reputation amongst consumers as taking them for granted. Especially in the time frame we're talking about. If we think 3 years ago, earning rates had been devalued, benefits had been devalued, as compared to for those who are familiar with non-US airlines around the world, when you're an elite member, you actually get real benefits outside of the US or outside of North America. If you think about lounge access, or you think about real priority services, or genuinely being taken care of when things go wrong, some of these things that people might think back 10 years ago and go, actually, United did do, look after me when things went wrong. You don't usually hear somebody say that in more recent years, or, and it could be Delta, or it could be American. Everyone gets lumped in together, and that's, to some degree, that was their own deliberate strategy of, we're just going to copy each other, because there's no point us there was an attitude amongst them, which they openly stated as, there's no point us being innovative, and I'm going to make this up. If you're American, you're saying there's no point me innovating because Delta United can copy me instantly. Now, we did see them diverge just before the pandemic. Under strong leadership in on all three programs, we actually saw them be daring and diverge. But that was the context that you had to develop the new Aeroplan program, was there was this apathy amongst consumers that the big programs, there was questionable value there for people because all they do is keep taking things away. How did that mindset impact your team when you were putting things together, particularly with wanting to make sure that there was still a clear, attractive value proposition to actually be able to incent people's behavior to come and join the program and engage with the program?
Yeah. So there was a question in there somewhere.
Yeah. It's a loaded context.
So I'm not going to sit here and cast shade on the on my U.S. competitive set.
Well, I can do that.
Well, thanks. But I will say, as we set out to make a relatively bold entry into the U.S. market, or at least bold by our standards, we consciously did not look too close at what our U.S. competitive set was doing. Partly because we thought that was going to be limiting. What we really wanted to do is focus on what is the value proposition that we can deliver, and what are the objectives that we're trying to deliver against. And so, for us, just for context, in the U.S., we call it second home market because we fly to 7 less cities in the United States than we do Canada. And when you consider our flights that are flying over the Atlantic and over the Pacific, and even to deep South America, half of the customers on that plane, on each of those aircraft, have actually connected in from the United States, using Canada as a geographically convenient connection point to get to their final destination. Now, as a I could share with you statistics that make us sound big. I can also share with you statistics that make us, seem quite small. And we are small. Relative in the U.S., we are the largest international airline serving the U.S., and we still represent like less than 4% of international traffic. In terms of overall market share, which I think equates to like a gnat on an elephant's ass. So, as a technical term. But our ability to grow our airline, to grow our share of Sixth Freedom traffic, is significant. It is small in the broad context of the U.S. market, which is just a massive market, but it's major for us. And we believe that the Aeroplan instrument, creating just a compelling international loyalty program that gives you access to over 45 different partner airlines, and as a result builds connections that other loyalty programs simply can't create, we think is, for many folks, an entry point into Aeroplan. So many Americans, so many of our US-based members, their entry point into Aeroplan was not to book a flight on Air Canada. It was because they saw value in one of our redemption partners. But sure enough, if you look at the cycle, the life cycle of those members, what we are seeing is that they are coming back, and we are finding them more and more on Air Canada flights because they're now a customer that we know and have actually forged a relationship with.
It's an interesting point, and Kathryn, I'll come to you in a minute, but I'll give you a little bit of breathing space for a minute or two here. Because we sort of didn't cover it in the intro session this morning, but a good loyalty program can only make up for a bad brand to a certain extent. And on the flip side, a bad loyalty program only has a certain amount of grace before it negatively affects a good brand. The reality is those two have to be aligned. The customer experience with the brand, it's got to be top-notch. If you really want to optimize performance for the loyalty program, the customer experience with the brand has to be top-notch. There's no point you having the best loyalty program in the world if part of the behavior you're trying to encourage is flying on Air Canada. If they get off an Air Canada flight and I'm never flying with this airline again. Change Air Canada to be insert random airline name here. We all understand that. Bed Bath & Beyond. David, where are you? I know we were saying we were going to joke about Bed Bath & Beyond. Hopefully no one's a shareholder. But the truth is that David and I, if you followed our commentary on LinkedIn, were highly critical of Bed Bath & Beyond last year when they spent $1 gazillion relaunching their loyalty program, trying to, again, move away from coupons. And of course, it was the worst value relaunch of a program ever. Now, let's be truthful. Doesn't matter how generous they were going to be. They were the Titanic. They were going down. It was a timing question. But Sears, it's a little unfair to do a similar comparison. They actually had a really good loyalty program, but again, structural issues. It's not going to solve the problem. So, and I know that as program managers, we can't control the brand experience, but the best we can do is we talk to our operational colleagues, and we really try to instill the importance of things like recognizing our elite members. When things go wrong, don't worry about the fact that things go wrong. The more experienced and the more senior our customers, the more they actually understand that things go wrong. Yeah. But look after them when things go wrong. At least acknowledge to them that they're there and you're going to do what you can to get them home or to make sure they have a hotel for the night or another room or whatever it might be. Don't worry about the fact that things go wrong. It's about getting our colleagues to understand the importance of the investment that we make in our members, and our members want to feel that, to the topics about personalization we've been talking about, they want to feel that we recognize them. It doesn't necessarily mean recognize elite status, but recognize that they're a member, we know they're a member, we know that we have a relationship with them. And that really comes to this concept about, is loyalty transactional or emotional? One last question to Scott before we sort of transition over to Kathryn. I want to try to segue this as best as I can. You had a little anecdote, Scott, when you were building the Aeroplan program that Mark and Derek and yourself talked about, and that was, actually maybe we'll pose this to the audience. What's the biggest frustration? Speak personally or from your insights into your own members. What is the biggest frustration members have with airline frequent flyer programs? I don't mean this year, I mean any time in the last 20 years. Rick, what's the answer? The biggest frustration members have with frequent flyer programs?
There's too many of them.
Too many members or too many frequent flyer programs?
There's too many people that are, top tier, early board.
Forget top tier. Forget top tier. You're an average member on the street, mum and pop kind of member. Redemption availability. Redemption availability. Is it redemption pricing or redemption availability? I mean, they're sort of linked. There's a little bit of both. But the most important is, you told me to join I'm going to paraphrase Karen Zachary again. People join Delta SkyMiles because they want to redeem a free flight sometime in the future. I join Starbucks because I want to get a free cup of coffee sometime in the future. If I join your program, you've promised me if I do the behavior you've asked me to do, I'm at some point in the future going to be able to redeem a free flight. And I can't. It's been the biggest frustration point. And you consciously went into that design process thinking, how do we, it's a very complicated situation. It's not there's no silver bullet to fix it. But you went in with a very conscious decision we are going to have a strategy to design as best as we can the mechanisms in the program to help avoid or minimize that pain point. Can you just maybe talk to that?
Sure. So first of all.
So your friends, I'm talking about your friends at Revenue Management.
Oh, I know you are. First of all, to your earlier point, yeah, it's really hard to be loyal to a bad product. And so, yes, you do have to show up both in terms of the loyalty program, and you have to show up in terms of your product experience. And with my group at Air Canada, we actually head up both the product and the loyalty program. And so, we consider our cumulative investment in the customer across both the reward side and the product experience side, making sure that the pendulum doesn't swing too far in either direction. As it pertains to rewards, one of our key principles, key design principles for the program was we have to make rewards rewarding. And in order to deliver on that, promise, we engaged our revenue management team and our finance team at the ground level of the internal design of the program. The internal design of the program, pretty simple. We have to make sure it's sustainable. We have to make sure it doesn't lose money. And so, as we sought out to figure out, at least as it pertained to the inventory that Air Canada can contribute for rewards, we made sure, and this was us locking ourselves in a conference room for a week. Actually, it was a little more than that, but it was, I think that they had dialed the heat up in there as well. But we locked ourselves in a conference room and came up with a framework and did not leave until the framework was sorted out, such that loyalty was seen as a virtue as opposed to a vice. And really that came into what that ultimately came down to was a mechanism that ensured that we can offer every seat on every flight. And so even though the point value might be higher, it actually is still at a very good value. And make sure that we can also mix in with that what we call sweet spots. And sweet spots are a combination of our own distressed inventory or flights that we know are otherwise going to go out with open seats, and making sure that we can offer those at, call it outsized value and outsized discounts. As consumers, you might need to find yourself shifting your dates around to find those sweet spots, but they're there. And then mix those in with that lineup of partner airlines, especially as you're considering world travels, making sure that we can offer those that also, because that's their distressed inventory, so we're able to provide those to our members and to enable them to create itineraries at outsized values as well. But all this to say, you don't really have a loyalty program unless you can show up with rewards. But at the same time, not everyone is flexible. When you go to Marriott's website, you don't see an image of the Cleveland Airport Sheraton. You see images of the overwater villas in the Maldives. But that's not where most folks are actually using their points. They're using their points for the airport Sheraton. We have the same thing. We have a lot of our customers, a lot of our members using their points for short domestic, non-fancy trips, but they enjoy getting utility out of their points. And for that, you do need to show up with an every seat, every flight proposition, in addition to the sweet spots. And we'll get you to the Maldives handily in a premium cabin as well.
There's two big, huge takeaways there. I mean, we touched on that yesterday, didn't we? I mean, we talked about with the Delta example. The reality is most people do for short haul, economy, domestic, utilitarian trips, functional trips. But that's not what motivates them. It is the picture of the overwater villa in the Maldives. It is the idea of the first-class flight to Paris, what we call the desirability or attractiveness of the reward proposition. I mean, we all innately understand it. Sometimes we get caught up in the weeds. But the other thing is we talk about distressed inventory. And I mean, I think it serves a reminder. Again, I know we all know this, but it's a reminder that traditionally, I mean, in the US we call it saver inventory. In other countries we call it classic awards or, otherwise. But the reality is the whole idea about being able to offer reward seats on a plane or reward seats in a hotel was what we expected to be distressed inventory. It was seats that were going out empty. So therefore, the true incremental cost of carrying a reward customer was, in the US, it's probably gone up a couple of bucks in the last few years, but it's about $35 to $40, right? It's basically incremental fuel and insurance. I mean, landing fees, whatever else, but I mean, there's cents in the dollar we're talking about here, because that seat is going empty, so it's basically all cream on top. Forget about your internal revenue accounting, but the good thing about modern accounting standards, for those who aren't familiar, is it's revenue on the P&L. So redemptions actually drive revenue, which is a much nicer position we're in than a few years ago where we had to explain, yes, it's a cost, but we've actually got the deferred revenue and the liability. You've lost everybody at that point. But the distressed inventory concept, I think, is important, but there's a lot less distressed inventory now than there used to be, which is where we came into the problem of reward availability, and this is how you've tried to solve it. I think about Qantas. Qantas solved this, what they called it any seat availability, 10, 15 years ago. The problem is if there any seat availability, it's going to cost you 2 million points. And that's just as ridiculous as not having availability. So it doesn't, it's a complicated problem to solve, but you really went in with sort of this blended approach to be like, look, we'd love to put everything on saver award pricing, but you can't. We would love to have every seat available, but the pricing can't be ridiculous. So how do you have sort of a range where it's still, and I think predictable pricing is part of this as well, because you wanted to make sure that members weren't going in with an attitude of, don't you worry about what the price is. When the time comes, we'll tell you, No, that's not going to motivate customer behavior. But at the same time, you knew you couldn't promise people it's only going to cost you 10,000 miles. It's a bit of a compromise between that. I'm going to use that as a segue to Kathryn. For those that aren't familiar with Marriott, Marriott traditionally had a traditional award chart, and that was if you wanted to stay at I'm going to make up a property here, if you wanted to stay at the JW Marriott in Palm Springs, it was 50,000 points. And you knew it was always 50,000 points. And Marriott adopted what SPG pioneered in the industry years ago. There was a regular room available for sale, you could redeem it on points, which is different to the traditional airline approach, which was those cheap Save Reward seats were only available if there was distressed inventory. With SPG, and that was the old hotel approach in the day, SPG pioneered the concept of no blackout dates, whereas those, it wasn't just reserved for distressed inventory. The hotel might have been forecast to be completely full, or may have ended up completely full because the tour bus broke down out the front, or the airport shut down if it's an airport hotel, but you could still redeem for 50,000 points at that property. That becomes costly for the program. For those who don't know how hotel programs work, basically hotels individually, which are usually owned by third-party franchisees, they are reimbursed based on the occupancy on the day. If they are full, they are basically reimbursed at their full average daily rate for the night, so that the hotel isn't out of pocket by a reward guest displacing a revenue opportunity. That's the very simple version. The reality is a lot more complicated. I won't reveal the trade secrets, but your reimbursement chart is multi-pages long for properties, and it's very highly complicated. But the basic concept is like that. Now the problem is you offer that property for 50,000 points each time. Sometimes it's okay for the program economically because the hotel was empty. You're not displacing a revenue guest. Therefore, you're reimbursing the property at a base rate that covers the cost of flipping the room. But, there's not really a lot of fat in there, but there's also not a lot of cost for the program. It's good value for everybody. The member of the program, the hotel, and if it's a full-service property, they don't get much for the room revenue, but they've got a guest in-house that they can hopefully sell some business to at the bar or the spa or tours or things like that. It gets expensive when the property is full. Then we added on peak and off-peak pricing. Hyatt recently moved to add on peak and off-peak pricing. Hilton was sort of ahead of the curve of that as well. Again, cyclical in the industry. You mentioned Marriott's a very mature program. When you merge 30 brands, there's more since then and more in the works. So, huge program. And more recently, there really isn't a fixed award chart anymore. You want to stay at the JW Marriott Palm Springs, you can't go online and look that up and see, it's 50,000 points each night. Now, it might be, if you search for tomorrow night at the Marriott Palm Springs, it might be 50,000 points. It might be 80,000 points. It might be 40,000 points. But it might be in theory. That just sounds incredibly complicated from a how do you manage that perspective. And again, you put your member hat on, it's much nicer to just be able to tell the members how much it's going to cost and just have a fixed chart, and then they know and you know, and it just works. Please, let's spend a few minutes talking about how do you approach that, how do you think through that, and I sort of tease some of the different stakeholders that you sort of have to answer to. I know not everyone is familiar with the nuances. Maybe we could explore that.
For sure. I think that you described everything very well. I think as we have this continually growing company, right? All new brands that get added in different brand segments, right? Most recently, we've announced the launch of City Express, which is in the mid-scale chain scale, as well as our Project Mid-X, our mid-scale extended stay brand. So in no reason should a mid-scale hotel be priced the same as the Ritz-Carlton, right? You'll never see that happen. So how do we keep ourselves open to all of those possibilities? We could continually add rows to the award chart, which gets really confusing. We added a few seasons, but still that maybe doesn't cover the breadth of value that the hotel or that the member can get at hotels. So I'll just start back with the moving from the award chart to off-peak, peak, and then most recently to our removal of the award chart. And so one of the things I wanted to think about is, who wants to go to Palm Springs in March? I would love to go to Palm Springs in March, right? Weather, perfect. Who wants to go to Palm Springs in July? Right? You sweat your patootie off, right? No one wants to go to Palm Springs in July. So does 50,000 points seem like a decent number of points to spend in March? Yes. Is 50,000 points the right number of points to spend in Palm Springs in the middle of the desert in the middle of the summer? That sounds pretty rich, right? I would just pay cash, or I would just go somewhere else. And so without implementing off-peak peak, we weren't able to accommodate that seasonality that comes with resorts. Or even in Chicago, where I'm from, summer in Chicago is amazing, and we should be charging that number of points. But in January in Chicago, nobody comes to Chicago in January, right? And so that was the idea of offering off-peak peak. Let's provide some seasonality. So then as we started thinking about all of this future growth of the company, et cetera, and how are we going to keep up with all of that growth, that is where we started to think about this idea of flexible redemption, or removing the award chart. And with that, so as we were doing, obviously, a lot of analysis around it, we were also doing a lot of member interviews related to the award chart, removing the award chart, understanding what their perspective was of what's valuable for me, what's not valuable for me. And I remember one of the interviews, so we would have a screen there and it would list the hotels. It was what we call a city search on Marriott.com. It lists all the hotels that are available for the dates that you mentioned, the points required, it's got a lovely picture of the hotel, et cetera. And so we asked this guest, okay, well, tell us, what do you think about this? And he gives us feedback on, the iconography on the page, et cetera. And so we said, okay, well, what do you think about this category thing there? And he said, oh, yeah. So I see there's a palm tree in the picture. So this is a hurricane hotel, right? Like, that is how the average Joe, am I allowed to say it, thinks about categories. They don't think about it to the level of detail that all of us in this room think about it. And the fact that somebody thought it was a hurricane zone, maybe category wasn't the right thing. So we've removed category chart, and now we are in a more dynamic pricing for our awards. And I really like how you were talking about all the different stakeholders that are part of that redemption decision making. Obviously, the members first. We have all of our bosses and everything, right, that we report to. But what's maybe a little bit different for a hotel loyalty program than other industries is this idea that you were talking about of the hotel. We actually reimburse the hotel. That is actual hard cash that is going out of our loyalty program to the hotel, because we have to make sure that our hotels are enjoying the fact that they're getting all these redeemers as well, and continue to offer, the exceptional service that we were all just talking about. And so when we think about pricing from a hotel loyalty program, we have to think about not only what is the member value, how is the member going to perceive this point pricing, but also what is the cash the loyalty program is going to have to pay out to the hotel, and let's make sure those two things are in balance. So that's just a different nuance, I think, on a hotel loyalty program in comparison to maybe some other loyalty programs that you're familiar with. I don't actually remember what your question was. I just wanted to share more.
Can you paint the picture? Some of the complexity that we need to think about. And look, for those that know, obviously, one of my biggest clients is Radisson Americas, and Matt Vaccarello, I don't think he's in the room yet, but at the last Loyalty Summit, he spoke a lot about our development process a couple of years ago when we redeveloped and relaunched our award chart and reimbursement structure and everything as well. And if you think about Marriott, we talked, it's a huge program. It's a very mature program. It has a massive active base. It also has a very mature critical mass of co-brand card holders and co-brand spend volume, which, cha-ching, pays our wages, right? Let's not beat around the bush. That is the name of the game when it comes to talking to our bosses. And if we're a public company, to our shareholders. So, the truth is that the more top-line revenue you're getting from your co-brand cards, the bigger voice you have at the big table when you actually want to do something that might require investment in member value. Right? You can't just go hat in hand asking to increase member value if you can't demonstrate some commercial upside to that. This is no different to any other job in any other company, right? Let's just be realistic about that. So our perspective was, we are the complete opposite company of Marriott. We are a challenger. We are a challenger program. We certainly have some hotels that cross chain scales. We don't have a JW Marriott. We did have a Maldives property before we split. We certainly had some business city hotels that were comparable in quality to some higher end full-service properties that might be in the Marriott portfolio, and a lot of, I call them mid-scale brands, but that's not the technical term because really I'm talking about upscale. But you think about your Hampton. For us, it was a Country Inn & Suites. For Hilton, it would be like a Hampton Inn or a Hilton Garden Inn. For Marriott, it's going to be like a Four Points or a Courtyard. These are functional road warrior, often airport hotels. They serve a purpose, but they're not the Motel 6. They're in between those. I don't want to talk in what we call chain scales because, again, we're getting into technical weeds. But our approach was, and our feedback from members and our market research was very interesting. Number one, members wanted to know how much an award was going to cost. But I want to just go to the point that Kathryn made about, the average member, they don't understand any of this. They don't understand any of this, and it's all well and good, and that might conflict with what I just said. But the difference is we're a small program, less complexity. Our award chart could be very simple. As Kathryn explained, the problem is when you start adding complexity, the award chart gets more complex, which means you're adding another layer of complexity too, and complexity is the enemy of engagement. So you're in this rock and hard place situation in that dynamic. In our case, we were very clear. We wanted to maintain an award chart. We fully believed in the behavioral economics and the psychology of member behavior, that members need to know how much an award is going to cost. To Scott's point, everything is about the award redemption. Everything in loyalty comes down to the award proposition. That's what motivates customer behavior. Those who've heard me talk about the psychology before, there's different theories. My favorite is Rota's. It's very simple. It's a concept called behavioral potential, and it's a function of two variables. The expectancy that I'm going to reach the threshold to achieve an award, which could be a redemption, it could be an elite status, it could be, I don't know, your kid brushes their teeth enough and they get a Matchbox car. It doesn't matter. It's the belief that you're going to achieve the goal that you're aiming for. And the second variable is the desirability of that reward. If I go and spend $100,000 on Scott's co-brand credit card and he says, congratulations, your award is a glass of water, it's probably not really going to motivate me to do that. If I go and spend, what was the threat? Was it $1 million?
For a glass of water?
No, you're the phone or you're that.
Oh, $1 million.
If I go and spend $1 million on my co-brand card and I get the award of
Companion reward for the whole year.
Companion award ticket for the whole year, hey, not everybody has the ability, so there's a question about that achievability that I mentioned, but if you're in a position where maybe you have a lot of business expenses and you might be able to move that level of card spend volume, if all of a sudden you are in that achievability range, that is a desirable reward. So these are the sort of dynamics that we thought of when we were putting it together, and we had the luxury of being a smaller brand. Being a challenger brand was important to us, that we had to offer superior perceived value because we didn't have that critical mass of activity that, as an example, because Kathryn's here, I'll pick on, Marriott had. But the reason I say that is because if I put my consultant hat on, the two most common questions I get from clients are about dynamic redemptions and about, on the earnings side, with regard to like loyalty status and things. Carolina, I know you have a question, and I think I know what you're going to ask. Please, go ahead.
Well, it's hard kind of answering right now, but do you guys think that there's this expectation from our loyal customers that there's going to be a transaction kind of outside the regular economic world? Because with dynamic pricing, it's just like, regular revenue. It's okay. It's okay. Currently, we know that, there's supply and demand, but then I think, but I would like to hear what you think as well. For the longest time, reward programs have been publishing, the reward charts. And where there was a ceiling and a floor, and now the tendency is actually to go more of a dynamic. And in the case of Canada, I would say now, every seat is available for a redemption, but the price will vary. But that's how the market works. It's simply because, we have instilled for years in the minds of our members that, the transaction we do is going to be different from the rules of the market. And then now, it's difficult to revert back because it should be the easiest thing to explain, right? And then, so that's my question. And then I think that as well, we kind of sound as aspirational with them, because let's not forget that there's this aspirational part of it, right? In Chicago last year, I think I mentioned that for me, the loyalty transaction is not complete before a redemption is made. So let's remember there's that emotional link, right? But also our members could understand there's dynamic pricing to those market rules. So do you think it's because how we've been doing it as an industry for years, why sometimes it's resistance, and every time there's a change, they're getting rid of the logs, the point tags. Oh my God, wait, just got evaluated again.
So the first thing I'll say is my advice to everybody is stop reading blogs. They're not representative of your members. No, I mean, we do pay attention to a small degree, but we're very disciplined that what we read we take with a very much a grain of salt, because it's not representative of the average customer. To Kathryn's point earlier about the palm tree, right? I mean, it's an extreme example, but it really tells you, just to digress very quickly, Americans changed to loyalty points. I've got to tell you, I speak to a lot of very experienced American Airlines top-tier customers who still struggle with understanding the concept, and it's supposed to be a simple concept now. So don't overestimate the ability of your members to understand something that we think even might be simple. So don't pay too much attention to what Voice Cuts is. That's my advice to all programs. But I think, Carolina, it's a great question, I think, topic for us to finish up on. Yeah, but Scott takes a different approach. But I think there's a couple of questions in there. If I can sum that up, tell me if I'm wrong. One is, I think, it's the way we've always done it. Have we created an expectation? I I don't want to use the word entitlement, but that's just an expectation of how things work. And then I think the second aspect was, if it is just purely market dynamic, do we lose the aspirational nature that has given us, to be honest, the magic and the sexiness of travel programs? We talk about this yesterday, travel versus retail, and is there, my word, not yours, but is there sort of some risk in that? Have I sort of summarized the two parts of your question?
In defense of travel bloggers. I think two things. Number one, travel bloggers do a great job of amplifying what's possible in a program, right? So, we join programs, we get excited about programs because of that aspiration, because of the overwater villas, even though we might not use them. It's good to know that our points might take us there. And when you read these travel blogs, they actually do a very good job of highlighting the sweet spots. Something to think about. Second thing is, they are the richest source of user-generated content on the web. So when you go to everything from ChatGPT or just to the Google, their articles are going to come up first. And so we do have folks that kind of sit in the middle. They are not road warriors or power travelers, but they are observing the fact that they probably should maybe put an ounce of thought into what credit card to put in their wallet, or where they might actually want to focus their loyalty. And it's the opinions of these bloggers that are in many respects shaping those opinions through their articles.
If you Google, is Aeroplan a good program to join, or should I get the Aeroplan credit
You'll
card?
get the points guys, a complete guide to Aeroplan, one of the first results that you'll see. So it really is important to make sure that, and it's very low investment and has the benefit of being true, to actually share context, share background, and share what you're doing with that community, because it'll serve you well as consumers navigate the wilderness of loyalty programs.
The flip side is also true. If your program is what they would call a dumpster fire, because you've sucked out all the value and you've screwed over all your members and taken all your benefits away, then the Google search will be at the top of the Google search results as well when someone says, should I get this credit card or should I join this program?
One might consider that a warning sign.
I would suggest that you should take that as a warning sign.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you would prefer to have your first example of a Google result than the second example of a Google result. Did you want to add anything else to Carolina's question about sort of the market dynamics? Because it's the way we've always done it. Is there risk of losing aspiration?
I mean, you brought it up at the beginning. Think about loyalty programs, airline loyalty programs, hotel loyalty programs. When they first entered the scene in the 1980s, we were enjoying, as an industry, 75% load factors across very small member bases, and co-brand credit cards didn't even exist. And so loyalty programs back in the day, when folks talk about the heyday of the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, you had a high number of surplus seats and smaller member bases. And what we have now are growing loyalty programs colliding with market dynamics of increased load factors. Right? We had a load factor last month that approached 90%. That's for every flight. We're not just talking about the flights to Fort Lauderdale. We're talking about the flights to Kitchener, Ontario, 90% load factors. And so what you're left with is too many customers or too many members chasing too few sweet spots. And so really the challenge of any loyalty program is not to go hide under a rock and just put your pricing up really high. It really is trying to find other ways, other redemption outlets, and try to do our part to make the redemption process more frictionless. And so that's everything from the digital investment that you make, the way that you actually build your award search, and seat finder tools. Because on the exact date that you're looking for, the seat might not be available, but a day from now or 2 days from now, 2 days from when you're looking to travel, it might be. And you might actually have that flexibility. So the digital tools have a role to play. But also broadening. We're an airline loyalty program, but we actually like to consider ourselves a travel loyalty program. And so, how do we create partnerships with hotel partners, car rental partners, other partners in the travel ecosystem? There are everyday partners to create more redemption outlets. Because again, the member behavior coming on the other end of a redemption is very positive. And so what we obsess about is how do we create more redemption opportunities, both large and small.
Can I add a word to that? Positive. redemption opportunities.
Positive redemption.
You want people to feel good about it. I mean, because you talked about the upside that comes after redemption. You only get that bump if members feel good about their redemption, and that's the whole goal of everything you're talking about in terms of designing and broadening those opportunities. Kathryn, so it was about, have we always done it the same way, and the risks of market dynamics?
Yeah, I think that was a really good point of, hey, we used to do it this way, and now kind of everybody in the industry seems to be more and more dynamic. And I think that's just the way that we're headed. But one of the things I really like that you mentioned was about the bloggers, right? But just about communication. And so I think that was what was super crucial in our change from our category chart to our now dynamic pricing, is we were proactive in communicating it. And we did our best to say, hey, the world is not going to be on fire, that it's not ending with the removal of our category chart. But of course, people were skeptical. When we finally went live with our dynamic pricing, we made sure that we communicated, hey, if you already have a redemption booking, like already booked, why don't you take a look and see if the point pricing is different? And the number of people, both on social media, blogs, et cetera, that were able to rebook their stay at lower points required was huge, right? And so that in itself amplified our message of, hey, this move to dynamic pricing, this offers more Easter eggs of value, or it just offers more value even if it's not an Easter egg. But then the other thing that I really liked was this idea of how do we offer redemption opportunities that are both large and small. So definitely through partnerships, you're absolutely right. And I think that's where we capture our members when they are not staying in a hotel, right? Through Uber Eats, et cetera. But then also, I love our Marriott Bonvoy Moments program, and I will say this is not my area of expertise, so this is just the little that I know about it. But you can redeem bushels of points for incredible once-in-a-lifetime experiences. You can go to Coachella, you can go to the Super Bowl, et cetera. But most recently, we just offered our 1 point drops, which is essentially you can redeem for one of these experiences for 1 point. Obviously, it's a very limited number, and it's first come, first serve, but finding those opportunities for members to redeem even small numbers of points for incredible value. So I think it's both in communication as well as I really love the idea of how can we make sure that we have redemption opportunities for folks with a variety of point values in their account.
And I think just to finish off, I think the one point we haven't covered, but I think it is important to cover off to answer your question, Carolina, is we do have to be careful, particularly in the US market. And the reason I use the US market as an example is a saturated credit card rewards market. And the airplane co-brand card isn't the only card you can get. And the suite of Marriott cards isn't the only card you can get. You can get a Citi rewards card. You can get a Chase rewards card. You can get an Amex rewards card. You can get a Capital One rewards card. And if we take dynamic redemptions and we take it to the extreme logical conclusion, if you were to go all the way down that path, and to Kathryn's point, you look at Palm Springs tomorrow, you're not going to find it for 2 million points. Okay, maybe it's not 50,000, maybe it's not 30,000, but it's not going to be 2 million points. It's still going to be, I like to joke, there's no war chart there. It's just a kid war chart. I mean, I can say that you can't, but there's reasoning behind. There are sensible limits, and Scott spoke about this as well. There's sensible limits on pricing. If you take it to a full market dynamic, then there's no outsized value to get. Then there is no aspirational value to achieve. And the problem with that is in a market where you have competitor rewards cards that aren't program cards, if members feel, number one, for those who do math, which is a very small percentage of members, if they do math and realize that the value is crap and they're better off with a cashback card, they'll switch to a cashback card. But your bulk of members, your palm tree members, it's too difficult to get all one. I can't get my head around it. I can never find a reward for the points I have in my account. Why did I bother with this? This is a waste of time. Well, the worst is the person doesn't even bother getting your program card or joining your program because they were at family dinner table last week and Uncle Joe was bitching about it was too difficult, don't waste your time, don't join them. So what do? They get a Citi cashback card. phrased our approach at Radisson versus Marriott's approach, and this is the way I answer my consulting clients, is where is your program in its life cycle maturity? If you're a challenger program, your strategy needs to be very, very, very different to if you are a large, mature program with a huge critical mass of members and existing activity and co-brand spend volume and things like that. So there's no easy one-size-fits-all, but there is danger in both extremes of the solution, and it all comes down to we want to appear attractive to members, and we want to provide value, we want to give them a reason to engage in our programs, and if you're a mature program, you've got to give them reason to engage further, deeper, stay engaged. And ultimately, of course, we want them to get our co-brand cards, spend on it, and do other profitable activities and engage with our other partners and things like that. Thank you to Kathryn and Scott.